Hi, and welcome to Dutch the Podcast. I'm Mike, and right there is, as always, Tom Byfoot. He is the publisher of Dutch the Magazine, De Krant, and, of course, the Grand Poobah and Chief, what do you call it? Chief Cook and Bottle Washer, I guess, at Dutch the Media. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Mike. How are you? Yeah, Chief Cook and Bottle Washer. That pretty much covers it, I guess.
It's so funny. In the entrepreneurial world of creating publishing, there are a lot of things to do, including what we're doing today, which is a podcast we've had going on now for over a month. And let me hand out some kudos to you, Tom. It seems to be catching on quite nicely. And many thanks to you, the viewer and listener, for being there for us.
Well, and thanks to you too, Mike. You've been asking some amazing questions that we've covered. You know, from Aurora Borealis to what's Holland and what's Dutch actually mean.
Exactly.
But anyway, today we're talking about a much more serious topic, I'm afraid, but it's an important topic, and I'm glad we're covering it, and I'm glad we found a really very knowledgeable guest to talk about it. We're talking about a gene mutation today that afflicts people who descend from the northern Netherlands in particular, but people from the Netherlands in general. It's important that there's awareness around this gene mutation. It originated in the northern Netherlands about 700 years ago. They don't know exactly, but basically everyone who is descended from that initial carrier has the potential, may have that gene, and the gene can cause, and this is important, can cause very severe, even fatal heart disease. Not in everyone, but I think it's important for people, especially if there's heart disease in the family, to be aware of this.
We've been fortunate enough for you to line up a chat with Dr. Dean Jansen today. And we'll get to that in a minute. I'll remind you, subscribe to the podcast, share it with a friend. Don't hesitate to review it, and give us a good review if you like it. We would appreciate that. Also, Tom, you often point this out because it's a great way for you to stay in touch with the Dutch community. Reach out to us.
Yeah, please use our website at dutchthemedia.com. Of course, if you're watching this and listening on YouTube, you can also leave a comment on YouTube itself. But ideally, if you could reach out to us, ask us questions, suggest topics, suggest guests, dutchthemedia.com contact form on the site. And that's, of course, also where you can get everything else related to our publications, like take out subscriptions or renew them, buy books. We've published a number of books. But you know, we can talk about that a little bit after we've spoken to Dr. Jansen, because I think it's important we talk to Dr. Jansen now.
Yes, this is a very, very interesting interview. I recommend if you have a Dutch lineage, this might be of interest to you, and certainly to the ones that you love. It is a health issue worth talking about. Here is Dr. Dean Jansen speaking with Tom.
Today we are talking with Dr. Dean Jansen. Dr. Jansen is the secretary of the PLN Heart Foundation. He's also a carrier of the gene, and he is a retired orthopedic surgeon from Warsaw, Indiana. Hello, Dr. Jansen, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here today and giving me the opportunity to speak about this very important subject.
Yeah, thank you. Now, maybe right from the top, it's probably a good idea to explain what PLN cardiomyopathy is.
PLN is the phospholamban protein of heart muscle. The protein is important because it regulates calcium flow in the heart. The PLN mutation is genetic change in this important calcium regulating heart protein. So the PLN cardiomyopathy is the calcium imbalance in the heart, which leads to cell death, fibrosis, heart rhythm changes, and heart failure.
Okay, now I understand that you are a carrier, that you're even on a waiting list for a heart transplant. So how has this affected your personal life and maybe the life of relatives and family members?
Well, I was forced to retire from a job that I loved. During my first episode, I was in surgery doing a hip replacement, and I had to stop the case and have another surgeon take over the case and finish the operation.
Now, if I may just interrupt you there, sorry. And at that point, did you know that you may have heart disease or heart condition?
My brother had heart problems and my sister had heart problems, so I had seen a cardiologist and had some EKG abnormalities, and I was worked up by this cardiologist which demonstrated I had scar tissue in my heart. We did not know the cause of the scar tissue. We just knew that there was scar tissue there, and that predated my heart rhythm problems.
Okay, so you were operating on a patient when this manifested itself.
That was the first episode, was when I was doing that hip replacement that day. Yes.
Wow. And then there were subsequent episodes.
Yeah, I was still unaware that I had the PLN mutation at that time, and then I was in Greece taking some photographs, and I passed out in the streets climbing up a hill in Greece.
Wow.
And I had 2 other episodes immediately after that, which led me to have a defibrillator placed. So the defibrillator shocked me after I had a later episode when I passed out in the office seeing patients. I had several other episodes where the defibrillator paced me out of the abnormal heart rhythm, and I felt I was going to die. I felt certain that my life was over because I kept going in and out of the heart rhythm abnormality. Fortunately, my ICD defibrillator was in place, and that's what saved my life.
Wow. Now, you've had to retire from your work. You're a young man. So that indicates that the gene mutation can cause significant and severe ailments. Does everyone have every carrier have the same experience?
No. We have 11 family members with the PLN mutation. And in everyone, the PLN condition shows itself differently. My maternal grandfather died at the age of 38 of a sudden heart event that was called a heart attack. At that time, PLN was not known, and my mother was a carrier of the mutation, but she lived to age 87 without any major heart disease. My older brother has atrial fibrillation, which has not greatly affected his activities, and he's in his mid-60s. My sister has generalized heart failure and is extremely limited in her activity. I have ventricular tachycardia, and I am on the heart transplant list.
Okay. Well, what's the prognosis? Do you know how long that will take to wait for the transplant?
Well, currently, I'm not quite sick enough to justify a heart transplant. I'm very low on the list priority, but I can be moved up rapidly if I start getting more severe heart rhythm abnormalities again.
Okay. Now, you're talking about heart transplant. That's, of course, the ultimate, I presume, thing that can be done. What other options are there for treatment? Are there any options, and is there a view towards something that might actually permanently fix the issue?
Well, medications are used, and there are 4 classes of medications that are used for heart failure. They're not really specific for the PLN mutation, but are generalized medicines used for heart failure. I'm on 10 different heart medicines, and some are for the arrhythmia, and some of them are for the heart failure. If the mutation symptoms are not adequately relieved with medications, then there are 3 types of surgical procedures that can be done. I had an ablation, and my brother had an ablation, and I have a niece who is soon to have an ablation, which is burning of these abnormal heart rhythm channels in the heart. And that's been very successful in controlling my most severe heart rhythm abnormalities with ventricular tachycardia. Also, another important surgical treatment is implanting a ICD. An ICD is a defibrillator that goes under your skin and is wired directly to the heart. It has a computer on it which senses your abnormal heart rhythm and can shock you back into normal rhythm should you develop an arrhythmia. I have 5 family members that have had ICDs. I was shocked back into rhythm during my 3rd episode, and I've had 30 or more pacings to get me out of the ventricular tachycardia in the past.
Wow. I'm just going to remind listeners that we're talking about PLN cardiomyopathy, a disease that affects predominantly people of Dutch heritage, and that's why we're talking about it in Dutch, the podcast. Now, from what I understand, the gene mutation as a cause of the disease was only discovered very recently. I've got the date of 2010. I don't know if that's exactly right. But the mutation occurred in the late Middle Ages in the province of Friesland in the Netherlands. So since the connection was only discovered so recently, what is the level of awareness within the medical establishment, and then in particular family physicians and cardiologists that I would suspect people who are experiencing issues would go to?
Yeah, the level of awareness is far greater in the Netherlands, where half of the world's cases of PLN are likely present. But most family physicians and cardiologists in North America are unaware of PLN. So one of the goals of the PLN Foundation is to spread awareness. As a physician, I have been given presentations to various physician groups, alerting them of the importance of genetic testing when PLN mutation is suspected.
Okay, and that's part of what we're doing today, of course, also is raising that awareness. Now, I understand from your website that in the Netherlands about 1,500 carriers have been identified, but that there is an estimate of about 10 to 15,000 people in Holland alone who might carry the gene. Do you know how those numbers were arrived at, that estimate? And also, do you have an estimate, do you have numbers of potential carriers in North America, in the US and Canada?
Yeah, the estimation in the Netherlands was extrapolated from genetic surveys that were done in the Netherlands, which showed percentages of affected individuals with genetic mutations. And so half the world's PLN carriers are in the Netherlands, most of them in the northern Netherlands, centered around Friesland. Approximately 4,000 carriers exist in North America, and that's based on family origin immigration data. And based on
so that's an estimate,
that's
right?
An estimate.
4,000. Now, how many identified cases, do you know that as well?
Well, we've got less than 100 in our database in the United States and Canada so far up to this point. But we're told that certain centers like the Mayo Clinic, they may have as many as 40. Johns Hopkins has as many as 10. Stanford University has more than 20 cases that we've been noted to identify.
But either way, you're talking about less than 10% of the overall suspected population.
It's around 10% of the Netherlands have been diagnosed with the mutation that have it. In the United States, it's closer to 5% or less that have the mutation have been diagnosed. So we're at the tip of the iceberg.
So, yeah, it's very important to get the word out. And then after our discussion, I'll talk very briefly about specifically how you might know that your ancestors come from the northern part of the Netherlands. Now, of course, people have spread out. So even if there's not that direct connection with the northern Netherlands, there's still a possibility that that a patient might be a carrier, of course. Talking about that, can you tell us a little bit about what's known about the origin of the mutation in terms of location and timing and how it's passed on?
Yeah, the mutations began spontaneously probably in the late 1400s, which is over 700 years ago in the northern Netherlands. The mutation shows an autosomal dominance inheritance pattern, which means 50% of children of mutation carriers will have the mutation, and 50% are free of the mutant gene.
And once they're free, they can't pass it on. It's not like a recessive
Right, it's not a recessive gene. So you have to be a carrier of the gene to pass that on to your offspring, and only half of the carrier's children will have the gene. So those half that don't have the gene do not pass that on. Only the carriers that have received the mutation gene from their parent can pass that on.
Okay. And I might have been using, I'm not a medical professional by any stretch of the imagination. I may have used that word wrongly, but I think the message is coming across very clearly. People have been coming to North America from the Netherlands since the 1620s, since Henry Hudson sailed up the river that's now called after him. Does it make a difference when your parents came or your ancestors came to North America? Would someone who descended from the New Netherland Dutch have less or more of a chance than someone whose grandparents came here in the 1950s?
Well, the mutation was already established by 1620 in the northern Netherlands. So I would say that where the person immigrated from is more important than when the person immigrated. You know, there was a small focus of people even in the 1600s in the Friesland area that had the mutation. So it's possible that, you know, those people could have come in the 1600s.
Well, Peter Stuyvesant, the Governor General of New Amsterdam, was from Friesland himself. And I'm not saying that he carried the mutation, but he did come from that part of the country. So definitely people from Friesland were coming that early. And then, of course, there was a big exodus from Friesland in the late 19th century, and then again post-war. People from Friesland and Groningen as well, the northern provinces, were, I think, heavily included in the various immigration waves. I was alerted to PLN, I'd never heard of it, by a Dutch friend from Friesland who had severe heart disease, and he'd heard about PLN and asked his cardiologist about it. Turned out his condition had a different cause, but they checked it for him anyway. Do you think anyone of Dutch descent who has a heart problem should mention this to their physicians?
Well, if there's a strong family history of heart disease, particularly if multiple family members or family members have died at a young age of heart conditions, and they're of Dutch ancestry, then genetic testing is strongly recommended.
So there is a genetic test. How hard or easy is it to determine whether someone carries the mutation?
Well, the test costs about $250 to do a single gene testing. You can spend more money and get a whole panel of abnormal heart disease genes tested for. So either option is okay. Generally, we prefer the broader testing because that can pick up non-PLN related conditions. And if someone has a strong family history of heart disease, a broader panel of tested genes is more accurate for detecting and finding these mutations.
Now, what age do symptoms generally manifest themselves?
Symptoms have never started before puberty, but the youngest recorded death from PLN mutation is around age 20.
Wow. That is so. There are 5 million Americans of Dutch descent. We're talking about a potential of only about 5,000 carriers in North America. So it's important probably to realize that the fact that you're of Dutch descent doesn't mean you're necessarily immediately at risk. Are there still cases where you'd say, if you know you're of Dutch descent, and not everyone will know that even, but if you do, to be preventatively screened or tested?
If there's no family history of heart disease and there are no symptoms of heart disease, then preventive screening is probably not necessary.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Can you tell us a little bit about the organization? You're the secretary of the North American organization. There's an organization in the Netherlands as well. What do you do? How are you trying to create awareness? And how can people get in touch with you?
Well, the PLN Foundation was founded in the Netherlands by Peter Glynis, who incidentally had a heart transplant for the mutation. The mission of the PLN Foundation is to find affordable, accurate, and timely treatments for the mutation. And if someone has a strong family history of heart disease, then preventive screening is probably not necessary. Okay. Well, that's good to know. Can you tell us a little bit about the organization? You're the secretary of the North American organization. There's an organization in the Netherlands by Peter Glynis, who incidentally had a heart transplant for the mutation. The mission of the PLN Foundation is to find affordable, cure and treatments for the PLN mutation. And the ultimate goal is a cure within 5 years. The PLN Foundation is a transatlantic cooperative effort of research involving 6 academic centers, 3 in the Netherlands, 3 in the United States. Of note, 95% of North American PLN mutation carriers have yet to be identified, and identification is possible only through genetic testing. So we are trying to establish a database of North American PLN carriers so we can provide these patients with information about trials of therapy and new treatments that are available. Any donation to the PLN Foundation is used for research purposes. The latest information about PLN donations can be found at our website at plnheart.org.
PLNheart.org. And yeah, so it's plnheart.org.
Yes.
Okay, let's remember that, plnheart.org. Now, you mentioned there's 3 centers in the U.S. Where are they?
The 3 centers in the U.S. are Mount Sinai in New York, University of Cincinnati, obviously in Cincinnati, Ohio, and Stanford University in California.
Now, I would suspect that a large concentration of cases would be in Western Michigan, maybe New York State, areas where Dutch people have settled a lot. Central Iowa springs to mind as well. Do you see that?
Yes. The largest number of carriers we're seeing are in central western Michigan, in northwestern Iowa, and California.
Okay, yeah, California, lots of Dutch people settled in California. Well, thank you very much for taking the time. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
There's 2 things I'd like to add. One is the importance of genetic testing. I have a niece who was in her mid-30s who had a history of palpitations, but she did not think anything about it. And once her father was found to have the mutation, she was tested and was found to have advanced heart disease and had an ICD placed. She was walking out in the country and passed out while walking her 3 young children and was shocked back into normal heart rhythm. Without genetic testing, the severity of her heart disease would not have been detected, and her daughters could have lost their mother on that country road. Wow. The second thing I'd like to emphasize is that PLN Foundation is hosting a family information Zoom meeting involving several researchers and physicians from Stanford, Cincinnati, and Groningen of the Netherlands. And they'll be giving presentations about their research and treatment options. The date of the event is March 18th from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And registration is easy. You can just send me your email and I'll provide a Zoom link. My email is dean@plnheart.org.
Let's repeat that, dean@plnheart.org. And that's a Zoom event in March 18th.
March 18th.
Okay, that's very good to know. Well, again, thank you so much for wanting to talk about this and your own personal experiences with the disease. I wish you all the best in the near future, and thank you again.
Well, thanks for having me today.
Tom, that is a fascinating bit of information, and not even a bit of information. Knowing that Dr. Jansen is experiencing this, it's been devastating to his life, that he wants to share this information with people of Dutch lineage. But frankly, it being a genetic mutation, you need to follow up on it. That was fascinating. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, and I also, when I heard Dr. Jansen was a retired surgeon, I thought I didn't think he'd be that young. So it was really quite shocking that he was caught right in the middle of his work of a job he really loved doing, and that he had to retire from that. But it's great that he shared that information. To put it in perspective, though, it afflicts about 1 in 1,500 people in the Northern Netherlands. That's a huge number, of people. Yeah. But still, the chances that any single person would have the gene mutation are relatively small. Nevertheless, the awareness is important. And I thought I'd just share briefly for people whose Dutch descent may be a bit further in the past. I mean, people may not necessarily even have a Dutch last name. This can be passed down along the female line, and people have been coming to North America since the 1600s. But anyway, typical for Frisian Northern Netherlands Dutch names are names that end in an A, or typically an M-A, NGA, STRA. Examples would be names like Dijkstra, Jarisma, Huizinga, etc. Those are very common names in the Northern Netherlands. And then De Vries is one of the most common names in the whole of the country, and it literally means from Friesland, the Frisian. So if your name's De Vries, good chances that you descend from someone from the Northern Netherlands as well. So if you're of Dutch descent and there is heart disease in the family, I think it's important to be aware of this.
This is just one of many things you'll find covered, I think, in Dutch the magazine. This kind of article, I think, is it's a little breakthrough and quite different, I think, for your coverage, but really important. So, Tom, thanks for cutting out the time in the editorial space to talk about this, and we hope that it benefits many of you who might not know you have this affliction. All right. Yeah. Look, before we get out of here, a couple of reminders. Reach out to us. The information now on the screen. We'd love to hear from you. And I will point out that if you go to DutchTheMedia.com, Tom and I are constantly discovering with you on this show all kinds of amazing Dutch places and people and interesting events and stores even. Tom has written an amazing collection of essays in a book called Hidden in Plain Sight, available at Dutch the Media. And as I say, we'll put that contact information up and a look at the book there. It's a great discovery. And frankly, you could set out your own map of Dutch discovery right here in North America.
Oh, yeah, there are so many places, Mike. Thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, Hiding in Plain Sight, DutchTheMedia.com, or on Amazon, Barnes & Noble chapters, wherever you get
hot
your books.
Off the New York Times top 10 bestseller list, I believe.
If only.
Well, we wish that to be the case.
We're getting there.
And bit by bit, we're getting there with this podcast. Thank you very much for being with us. And Tom, thank you so much. We'll catch you next time.
Great. See you next time.